You have had an amazingly interesting and diverse career, have you not?
That's one way to put it. I was elected to the Hawaii State House when I was 21. People asked me, they're like, oh my gosh, you're too young. Too young for what? I saw things that I had not been exposed to before.
Tell me why you left the Democrat Party.
My position is equality for all Americans.
If this election goes in the direction of Donald Trump, would you accept a role in the administration? Tulsi Gabbard is an interesting American. You may know her because she's been in the headlines. She was a rising star in the Democratic Party. And then all of a sudden, stories started floating around that she, in fact, was a Russian spy. She wound up on something called Quiet Skies, a terror watch list, and had air marshals surrounding her anytime she flew, even though she is, to this day, a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves. She's been deployed, she's fought for this country, and she has left the Democrat Party. Spent some time as an independent. Within the last week, she has declared herself a Republican.
I'm proud to stand here with you today, President Trump, and announce that I'm joining the Republican Party.
We sat down and talked about this really storied journey that she's taken that wound up with her being a Republican just in the last few days, and how it all unfolded and wound up where she is today. Well, Tulsi, thanks for doing this. You have had an amazingly interesting and diverse career, have you not?
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, for sure. Were you the youngest person to ever be elected to Congress in Hawaii, or one of the youngest?
Yes. I was elected to the Hawaii State House when I was 21.
Yeah.
I've been told I was the youngest woman ever elected in the country. And then I was elected to Congress 10 years later.
When you were elected in Hawaii, had you graduated from college? You had not.
I had taken a break to help my mom. My mom had run for Board of Education. She was the
Right.
first person in our family to run for office. And I was at a point where I was thinking about going back to school and potentially studying political science. And then there was an open seat in the State House. And so it was like, all right, I can go and talk about it in a classroom, or I can actually just go and do it and be in a position to help solve problems. And I took that latter route and was elected.
Were you opposed?
Yeah, everyone else was very well established in their professions. It was interesting because they all took me for granted. When I knocked on their doors, they're like, oh my gosh, you're so young, or you're too young. And I just would respond and say, you know, too young for what? Do you want these guys who are in office now, who are retired and kicking their feet up on the desk and not actually doing anything? Or do you want some fresh leadership and new energy and new ideas to actually get to work and deal with the challenges we have?
Yeah. And you ran as a Democrat.
Yes.
And how long did you serve?
I was there for one term. I was campaigning for re-election when our National Guard Brigade combat team was activated for deployment to Iraq.
Yeah.
I was in a medical unit at the time and was not on the mandatory deployment roster. They had somebody already filling the job that I was trained in. And my commander called me and he said, hey, congratulations. You don't have to go. You can stay, keep campaigning, get reelected. It was not a contested race. Keep doing the good work, and then, you know, we'll see you when we get back in a year and a half. I knew very quickly there was no way that I could stay home and watch them go. So I withdrew from my reelection campaign, volunteered to deploy, filled a different job that they needed filling. And we were away from Hawaii for 18 months, and we were in Iraq for about a year in 2005. Yeah. It was an experience that completely changed my life.
What was the lasting effect on you of being in that combat zone?
There were really three major takeaways that I had from that experience. Was just the impact of the loss of human life, and how every one of us knew that any day could be our last. I saw and learned things that I had not been exposed to before. We had politicians fly in, take some photos with the troops, and then fly out again. Politicians who were very glad to get the photo op, but who very clearly didn't. The lack of care and understanding really was shocking to me. And then the third thing was the being exposed to the war profiteering of the military-industrial complex, even just on our camp and the operations that were happening in that country was incredibly eye-opening. And that whole experience is really, when I came back from that deployment, really felt compelled to find a way. And I didn't know exactly what it would be, but to find a way where I could take those experiences and try to affect those decisions being made about war and peace.
You've advocated a non-interventionist foreign policy.
Yeah.
Fair to say?
Yeah.
Do you think those experiences there drive your non-interventionist foreign policy attitude?
Yes. Yes, that was the beginning, and it caused me to really take a deeper dive into our country's history and present day approach to foreign policy that has for too long largely been interventionist, in the sense of let's go out and be the policemen of the world and go and topple dictators we don't like and protect the ones we do like and try to build little mini Americas around the world, and not really making these decisions based on what is in the best interest of the American people and our security.
How do you balance that against what some describe as the world's need for U.S. leadership around the globe?
Yeah, this has been the problem with, and it's not limited to one party, but it's really the uniparty of the war machine in Washington, is that the way that they assume we must exercise that leadership is through the use of either economic warfare or dropping bombs, rather than recognizing that peace through strength is multifaceted and requires the kind of direct engagement and diplomacy that we've seen over time from leaders like President Kennedy with Khrushchev and with Ronald Reagan, and quite frankly, with President Trump when he was first in office.
People have been critical of Trump now and others that I think practice diplomacy by having a relationship with dictators around the world. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing to have a rapport with somebody like Putin?
It's a good thing. As our commander-in-chief, I would want that person to go and have a good rapport, to be able to pick up the phone and call Putin, call Kim Jong-un, call any leader in the world to advocate for our interests, for the interests of our country and our security. If you don't have that open line of communication, it's going to be very hard to deconflict those tensions and to have straight conversations about what's at stake and how to work through those things.
Yeah.
President Obama refused to engage with Kim Jong-un, refused.
Yeah.
And the reason his administration gave was, we don't want to reward Kim Jong-un with a meeting with President Obama. And it always boggled my mind, because it's not a reward. It's about our president advocating for our best interest to try to de-escalate those tensions, and at that time to work towards denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula.
Was that attitude that Obama displayed then, was that a cornerstone of your disillusionment with the Democratic Party?
I don't know that I would say it's a cornerstone, but it was one of the many reasons over time that kind of resulted in the conclusion of today's Democrat Party leadership cares more about their own self-interest and their own power than they do the interests of the American people.
How so?
Well, I'll give you the first example that I was confronted with as a freshman member of Congress. I was barely in office for, 6 or 7 months in 2013, and I was a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. It was August recess, so all the members were back home and working in their district. President Obama said that he was going to come to Congress to ask for authorization to go and launch an attack in Syria, the beginning of what would be another regime change war. I immediately went back to Washington. I did my due diligence and my research, and I came to the conclusion that, unfortunately, they had no plan for what would happen next. They had no plan for what would any kind of retaliatory act look like, either against us or our friends in the region. It was astounding to me that after so many years of Iraq and Afghanistan, that they were saying, hey, we want to go drop some bombs in another country, and we don't think they'll respond. And I came out publicly against President Obama's course of action. I got a call within 24 hours, and their response was not, hey, we know you've been deployed to the Middle East a couple of times. We know you have this experience. What are your concerns? They were not interested in substance at all. They admonished me for having the audacity to go against my president, the president of my party. And that was all they cared about, was loyalty to President Obama and the party, rather than actually what's in the best interest of the people and why I came out with the position. Also, I saw how they were doing their best to try to limit my ability to have impact, which is why ultimately I decided not to run for re-election to Congress. I felt that when I would introduce legislation, they would not allow it to see the light of day, and that I could have more of an impact outside of the House of Representatives at that time than I could within a party that was not interested in the fundamentals of what it means to be an active and thriving democracy.
And how did that happen? What was the change agent? What pushed it off of what it was when you were enthralled with it, when you said, this is my home? What pushed it off of that? Supply chain issues are on the rise, whether caused by natural disasters like Hurricanes Helene and Milton, global conflict, or worldwide inflation. The impacts are being felt across the board. When there's an urgent need for essential items like medications, these delays can become catastrophic. In the face of disruptions and cutoffs, how will you care for yourself and your loved ones? The Jace case provides peace of mind for families during times of shortages, delays, and disaster. It's an emergency medication kit containing 5 life-saving antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. By completing a simple online evaluation, you'll be prepared for the unexpected. Don't wait until it's too late. The time to prepare is now. Right now, you can receive a discount on your Jace case. Just go to jace.com and enter promo PHIL at checkout. That's promo code PHIL at Jace, JASE.com, ensuring you have the right medications when you need them most. What was the change agent? What pushed it off of what it was when you were enthralled with it, when you said, this is my home? What pushed it off of that?
The biggest point where I saw and felt a major shift was when President Trump ran for office in 2016. I think it was already kind of starting to move in that direction. Like I said, with President Obama, it was 2013 at that time. They weren't interested in having Democrats who disagreed with the president, which was problematic in and of itself. And we saw the same under Republicans under President Bush, that they wouldn't go against their president, even if they knew that his policy was wrong. We don't want blind followers of any political party. But the shift in President Trump's election was very significant, where all of a sudden, if any member disagreed with the Democrat Party, you were told, well, if you don't go along with us, then you're supporting Trump. You're supporting this dictator, they said, this fascist, and all of the names that they threw out there. They threw out the Russia hoax. There were all of these different tactics that they were using to try to force this total compliance, really through fear-mongering.
And this Russia thing, that splashed up on you.
Yes, it did.
Where did that come from?
It came from this, I was going to say it came from Hillary Clinton. She was certainly the most high-profile person to push it. But really, when you look now over time, it's something that comes from their tried and true playbook, where anyone, because it's Donald Trump, it's Bobby Kennedy, it's me, it's, even Elon Musk, they're trotting it out right now in this election. They did it with the Hunter Biden laptop. It is the excuse that they use to try to discredit a person or information that they don't want voters to hear from or to see or be exposed to.
And they came after you hard. They were coming, spy, this, that. What was your reaction when you realized there's a campaign here to paint me with this brush?
Yeah. I had heard this stuff before. What surprised me was the day that I announced my candidacy for president. That week leading up to it, we had heard from NBC News. They were asking some questions about like my associations with Russia or whatever. Like, I've never been to Russia. I've never met Putin. I don't know what exactly they were talking about. And NBC News came out with this hit piece literally as I was walking up on the stage to deliver my speech. And it was a hit piece that planted the seeds for this, oh, there are some suspicious or potential nefarious associations with Russia or whatever it was. But that's what the article was about. They bumped it up so that it was released on the date. And that's kind of what showed the hand of, okay, well, this is, you know, the legacy propaganda media of NBC is in on it. And then it started coming from a lot of different directions. And then Hillary Clinton brought it in. And it's so insane on its face because none of them asked Hillary Clinton for evidence or proof. And the thing that bothered me the most was that people believed this. And not a single one of them said like, oh, okay, well, you know, I'm still serving in the military today. I've been in for over 21 years. Not a single one of them said, hey, this is a member of Congress on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee who has access to the highest level of security briefings, who still wears the uniform and is serving our country. Hillary Clinton, how can you call this person an asset of Russia or a puppet of Russia? Where's your proof? Because if you got proof, you better show it, because if that's true, then I shouldn't have access to any of this stuff.
Well, no.
It never, ever happened. I know why, but the problem was, and I had numerous interactions with voters as I was running for president who believed her. And they were so, like, great Americans who believed her. And when they met me, were so deeply troubled and concerned by this. This one woman in South Carolina, I remember very clearly, she's a local county chair of this very small rural Democrat party. We had like a town hall and a little barbecue shack in the middle of nowhere. And she came up to me with her eyes welled up with tears, and she put her hands on my shoulders and told me how troubled she was to hear this. And she looked into my eyes. She said, Tulsi, are you working for Russia? And it just broke my heart to see the effect of their propaganda and how damaging it is, I mean, really to our democracy. That instead of us having a conversation of her saying, hey, let's talk about your policy on healthcare. Let's talk about your policy and position on education. They plant these seeds in order to make it so that people are suspicious. And, you know, I gave her a hug and I told her I'm willing to give my life for my country, this country. The problem was I couldn't have that face-to-face conversation and that hug with every single person who had heard Hillary Clinton's lies.
You're a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, I'm a lieutenant colonel and a battalion commander in the Army Reserve.
And did they ever come to you and say, we need to do some kind of investigation or some...
Never.
They never said anything?
Never. And even most recently, in kind of one of the latest acts of political retaliation under the Harris-Biden administration, the very next day after I criticized Kamala Harris in a live TV interview and warned the American people, as I did back in 2019 when she was running for president, I warned the American people about how dangerous she would be as commander-in-chief, about how she would try to mask her insecurity and her weakness and try to appear strong as a commander-in-chief and prove her strength by using our military to accomplish that and needlessly putting people's lives at risk. The very next day after I did that interview, they added me to this secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. And I was going through in-depth screening day after day after day. Every time I flew, it would take me an hour to get through TSA. I get the quad S on my boarding pass, couldn't check in online. It was like the full thing. And I just thought like, okay, something's going on here because this is not a random selection.
Yeah,
every day, different airlines, different,
randomly.
No. But these air marshals came forward because they did not want to be used as pawns in what they clearly saw was a political attack. It's, you know, the military, again, we had members of Congress asking Department of Homeland Security, TSA, like, what are the grounds of you putting Tulsi Gabbard on a domestic terror watch list, having K-9 teams like looking around her every time she travels, 3 to 4 air marshals traveling with her and surveilling her every time she gets to an airport and leaves an airport and on the flights. Like, what are the grounds and basis for this? Because you're using taxpayer dollars. This is a serious thing.
Right.
Never a single piece of evidence put forward or any kind of justification. Members of Congress sent a letter to the, I think it was like the Chief of Staff of the Army, saying, if there is a real concern here, they placed her on this terror watch list. Have you been given any reason to investigate her? She's got a security clearance. What's going on? And I got a copy of the letter that was sent back to this member of Congress saying, basically, no, we have no reason to have any concern. If there were, then we have the teams in place who would investigate someone who is in this position, and there is no evidence.
Has anybody ever been held to account for that?
No.
Nobody's ever been investigated, reprimanded, said to produce evidence. Nobody's ever been censored, nothing.
No. And it's a very intentional tactic to criticize your opponent for doing the things that you are actually doing, to try to distract voters and foment fear and try to paint this picture of your opponent because you don't want them to see what you're doing in broad daylight.
Freud called that a defense mechanism called projection, where you project your issues onto someone else to deflect attention from yourself.
We're seeing it obviously in their criticism. They're saying Donald Trump is the biggest threat to democracy, and yet they're the ones who tried to keep Donald Trump's name off the ballot in over 32 states. They're saying, he will undermine the rule of law. Well, they're weaponizing the government against not only Donald Trump, but their political opponents. We're seeing it with the border. They're saying, Donald Trump is the cause of the open border, when actually, nope, you guys are the ones in charge, and you lifted all of the things that Donald Trump had put in place to secure the border. When you look at each of these examples, they are doing exactly that.
Now, when you say they, who are the they? Is this a nameless, faceless committee of people? Is this, you've mentioned Hillary Clinton. Is it Hillary Clinton at the time? Is it somebody else at another time? Is it the power structure within the Democrat Party? Who's doing this?
It's all of the above. When you look at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris specifically, it's been clear for a long time that they are the figureheads. And there are, it's people like Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and the longtime entrenched Washington establishment that is calling the shots. And some of them are political appointees. Yes, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama. Some of them are within the national security state. Yeah. It's very powerful people, both in the government and outside of the government, whose power is threatened by those who won't allow ourselves to be used as puppets and who have the courage to speak the truth and expose them.
How did this focus on you end? I mean, you left the party.
Yes.
Did it let up then? Did they say, okay, got rid of her? Is it still going on today?
It is still going on today. There has not been any kind of reprieve or break. And it continues on because, I served in some of the highest positions in Democrat politics in our country. And I've seen behind the curtains. When I first went to Washington, I was surprised because they were like, oh, she's the next rising star of the party and she'll be president one day. And this is who's going to play her in the movies. And I did not expect it at all. And I realized that at a certain point that my bio kind of checked a lot of the blocks that they thought were good for them. Yeah. And they just assumed that I would fall for the trinkets that they were dangling before me and think, oh, okay, cool. You're going to give me all this. You're going to roll out the red carpet for me. Like, awesome. I'll follow along. But that's not why I ran for Congress at all. And so it was that first public expression of opposition to President Obama, specifically on a very real issue that was related to why I ran for Congress in the first place that showed them like, all right, she's not just going to, go along to get along, stick to the talking points that they provided.
And it didn't take very long. I mean, it was the first time you raised your hand and said, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But when you first got there, you were the shiny new thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you were female, you were young, you were well-spoken.
Veteran, woman of color, from the Pacific, all these different things.
Yeah. So it's like, wow, look what we have here.
Yeah.
But we didn't know she was going to think.
Yeah.
We didn't know she was going to
have a mind of her own.
Yeah. Are you able to fly now?
As of now, I've been able to travel without the in-depth screening. But as of a few weeks ago, I heard this Quiet Skies domestic terror watch list is still active.
So are you on the terrorist watch list?
This Quiet Skies terror watch list.
That's still a deal.
As far as I know.
So when you left the Democrat Party, you became independent.
Yeah.
Are you now declaring yourself Republican?
I am.
And that's as of when?
About a week ago.
This is really recent.
Yes.
Okay. Why? Why go independent to Republican?
The direction of the Republican Party has changed significantly. It started with President Trump's first term in office and has continued here in the last year and a half or so into being what we now see, which is really the big open tent party. The way that he welcomed Bobby Kennedy and me and Elon Musk and Danica Patrick. She's never voted in her life. And now she's coming out and she's supporting Donald Trump, really bringing people together, not because, we all have passed some kind of arbitrary litmus test, but because we are committed to and very passionate about the most important issues to the American people that are rooted in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights.
I've spoken about Donald Trump and did last night. And I said, I'm not here to stand up for Donald Trump. In fact, I don't agree with a lot of what he says or does, but nobody agrees with everything or likes everything somebody else says or does. But you don't have to love everything about someone in order to love them. I'm here to stand up for all the people getting bullied and ostracized and canceled and attacked because they stand up and, say they're going to vote for one side or the other. And I wondered how everybody would respond to that because it was a very different speech, I think, than anybody else gave.
It was.
And I wondered how that crowd would respond to that. And I said, if your neighbor says they're going to vote for the other side, you should say, hey, that's okay. I still love you. Vote how you want to. Vote your conscience. It's okay. I still love you. We're all Americans. And
you got a big applause to that line.
I did.
If you were an American on 9/12, stand up right now. If you were an American on 9/12, stand up right now. That's who we were. That's who we are.
That sold-out crowd at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. And I saw Melania and President Trump after that, and they both said, that was great. You're really calling for unity here, and we love that.
It was a powerful message that you delivered, and you're right. It stood out and was very unique and different from many of the other speakers, and such an important one.
Well, I think it's so important. That's why I referenced 9/12.
Yes.
Not 9/11, 9/12, because the morning of 9/12, there weren't any Democrat or Republicans.
That's right.
We were all Americans. Everybody was an American. Somebody had attacked us, all of us. And when I was in Carolina a couple of weeks ago, helping with the hurricane recovery, there were neighbors helping neighbors. I mean, I was in a basement shoveling out mud, and there were like 10 people doing a line of buckets going up the stairs. Nobody asked the person they were handing the bucket to, what's your affiliation? What are your pronouns? They didn't ask anything. They just asked, hey, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And they all wore themselves out and sat under a tree together and talked. They were just all Americans helping a neighbor.
Yeah.
It was America at its best.
Yeah.
And I just hope we don't have to have some seismic event to remind us again that we're all in this together. It's okay to have differences. I would hate if we were all of one mind. How boring would that be? And, you've got to have flint and steel to spark ideas. I mean,
the same is true in just like your own personal relationships.
Oh my God, I've been married 48 years. I would hate to be married to me.
Yeah, right.
I want to be married to somebody who's different.
Or some robot that just says, yes,
Oh
yes,
my
dear, yes,
God.
honey. Like, that's, again, where, like, the things in our everyday lives that are real, where none of us agree on everything, but you love someone and you respect them, even if you end up disagreeing and saying, you know what, got it, you're coming from a different place. That's your right.
Yeah.
But in the party that I left, that was the way it used to be. And that's no longer the case.
I never voted ticket.
Right.
I always voted policies and looked for who was doing what at a given time. But I've written a book called We've Got Issues, How to Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity. And I talk about the tyranny of the fringe. It seems like we've got these fringe factions, really on both sides, that have a big megaphone and talk about these extreme issues that are being pushed. And it seems like the Democrat Party has really been hijacked by these extremists.
There are just so many different examples of how big tech is manipulating the information that we get access to favor the Democrat candidate and the Democrat Party. We see the same thing in a lot of the legacy and mainstream propaganda media. We see a lot of the same thing from the national security state. It's all of these different powerful entities that benefit from having these figureheads who will do their bidding. And the fear that has been created, like I cannot comprehend still how not a single Democrat in the House of Representatives or the United States Senate, and neither President Biden or Vice President Harris has taken a stand for Title IX and fairness for women and girls in sports and education. Not a single one of them has stood up and said, hey, this is wrong to have boys competing against girls in girls' sports. And I don't believe that they all have bought into the insanity of that viewpoint. They are just terrified to get up and speak the truth because they don't want to be called a transphobe. They don't want to be called a bigot and all of the other names that they throw out there.
Since you bring that up, you've had different positions on different LGBTQ issues, like gay marriage, and you've actually sponsored bills. You've then changed your position on that in the past. Where do you come down on gay rights issues? I'll ask that in a general sense as you sit here today.
Yeah. My position is largely a libertarian position of equality for all Americans. However you choose to live your life, whoever you choose to love, that's up to every one of us to make those choices. One of the big impactful experiences that I had in how I viewed these issues came through my deployments to the Middle East, where I experienced and saw what it means for a government to try to act as the moral arbiter for its people. And obviously it was very extreme in some of the countries that I was in. They had the religious police out there. They would not allow, for celebrations or fireworks or music to be played on Christmas Day or on New Year's Eve. But really it came down to a conclusion that government shouldn't be in this business at all.
Yeah. And at one point, I read a quote, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You had said that the Florida bill that is inaccurately referred to as Don't Say Gay bill, because it doesn't say that anywhere, didn't go far enough. Did you say that? And where do you stand on those issues now?
I'd have to go back and look at the details of that bill, but I think that what I was referring to was the fact that the legislation, I think, kicked in around middle school. My point in that statement was that this kind of sexualization of our kids does not belong in our public school system at all.
Do you have a problem with gay marriage? Do you support it?
I don't think the government should be in the business of deciding who gets to marry who. As long as the government is involved, it should be equal, whether you're straight or gay or
Yeah, and
those
that's
rights should
important
apply
for
equally.
reasons of insurance coverage. It really matters to
Yeah.
people whether or not the government recognizes them as a couple or not. And you don't have a position to block that.
No, of course not.
Yeah, but at one time you did.
A very long time ago,
Yeah, that was back in the early...
probably 20 years ago.
I've taken very strong and controversial positions about the Israeli-Hamas conflict and said that I think our elite universities are fostering intellectual rot by allowing or even fostering these demonstrations on campuses in support of known terrorist groups against a critical ally of America in Israel. I've interviewed Prime Minister Netanyahu about it, and I've seen these protests and demonstrations going on that tell me that we just don't have critical thinking happening on our university campuses. We still have American hostages being held.
Yeah.
What is your wisdom about this Israeli-Hamas conflict?
Yeah, I've been very outspoken on this since that horrific attack on October 7th in a few different ways, similarly talking about how the world should be paying very close attention to what's happening on our college campuses, to recognize what this very real threat is, that attack was not just the latest in the generations-long conflict between Israel and Palestine. It's the latest front of this objective that these radical Islamist terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS and Al-Qaeda and others around the world, their ultimate goal and objective is to establish a global Islamist caliphate, and that we must all live under their Sharia law and that caliphate. When we look at the charter of Hamas, it makes it very clear that their goal is to exterminate the Jewish people and destroy Israel so that Israel no longer exists as a means to that ultimate goal and objective they have. This ideology is the greatest short and long-term threat to civilization in the world and freedom. And so when we look at what's happening on college campuses here in America and in different parts of the world, where we have college students who are chanting and repeating Hamas's lines and refrains, propagating their views and fomenting anti-Semitism and, in some cases, actually violent acts against Jewish Americans, we can see the threat that it poses.
Yeah, it's hard to negotiate with somebody whose prime directive is that you be dead.
Yes.
And wiped off the face of the earth. And that makes it difficult to broker a peace.
Yes.
I've been to Israel, and I've been to the site of the Nova Music Festival and interviewed people that were there. And I've been to so many places that were attacked in their homes. And something that was a revelation to me is they were telling me that when Hamas invaders came in and they were hiding in their safe rooms, that what they heard through the door were Palestinian women and children ransacking their homes out there. These weren't just Hamas militants, but Palestinian populace just coming through the hole in the fence and just invading their home, taking everything that they could get their hands on. It made me wonder if there is a line to be drawn between Hamas and Palestinians. It's hard to tell where that line is drawn when I had multiple people telling me that.
Yeah.
And that's something I hadn't heard until I talked to the people that actually had their homes invaded.
Yeah. Well, I think the Palestinian people have been also subjected to death and suffering under Hamas's rule.
Yeah, people say, well, why don't they just kick them out? Well, it's a little hard to kick them out when they control the food, the medicine, the weapons. It's kind of like, yeah, say something about it, you're going to get shot in the head. So
Yeah.
it's a tough situation.
I think this is why the defeat of Hamas is so important.
Yeah.
On many levels.
Well, Netanyahu may not be real popular in Israel with the people on a lot of issues, but I do believe he's going to finish that war.
Yeah.
He's going to finish it because I think he believes that if he doesn't, it could be the end of Israel. And he looked me square in the eye and said, with or without the international community, I'm going to finish this.
Yeah.
And I looked him in the eye and I saw resolve. There were more Jews killed in one day than since the Holocaust. He said, we didn't have the ability to fight back then. We do now, and we are now.
Yeah.
And he was very clear about that.
Yeah.
If this election goes in the direction of Donald Trump, would you accept a role in the administration?
I would, if it was a role that I felt that I could actually be effective in helping to lead, specifically in President Trump's goals and objectives related to our foreign policy and our country's security. I'd be honored to help bring about that change. When you listen to the kind of transformational change he's talking about, that Elon Musk is talking about, that Bobby Kennedy, myself, and others are talking about, it's going to require a lot of leaders of courage with a strong backbone to take on the entrenched bureaucracies and multitude of special interests in Washington. It needs to happen. The American people deserve so much better than what we have, and to be in a position to help carry that out, I'd be honored to serve.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bill.
I appreciate it.
See ya.